Born from necessity, engineered for war. The Pantera-Class Gunships were the Freestar Collective's answer to UC incursions. Built by Lindan Engineering Corporation at the onset of the Narion War, Pantera-Class Gunships were deployed to defend the key worlds of Anselon and Deepala, Freestar Collective strongholds within the Narion System. With its distinctive over-under dual-prong fuselage, the Nacelles optimizes line-of-sight targeting, integrating a center-mounted cockpit, a transparisteel blast screen, and a 360-degree holographic awareness display. Its AI-guided targeting system ensures unparalleled accuracy, allowing pilots to engage threats with near-perfect precision. Modular hardpoints enable diverse armament configurations, with the standard weapons array including a mix of missiles or torpedo launchers, twin laser cannon mounts, and an assortment of ballistics, making the Pantera adaptable to multiple combat scenarios. Designed for aerial dominance, VTOL configured auxiliary thrusters mounted on articulating pylons provide enhanced maneuverability, enabling swift strafing maneuvers and vertical takeoff capabilities in contested battle zones. Though time has phased out most of these gunships, many heavily modified versions still remain in service, now mostly utilized by private defense contractors, bounty hunters, and even separatist mercenary factions like the First. Their rugged frames and legal versatility ensure that despite their official retirement many decades ago, the Pantera-Class Gunships refused to fade into obscurity.
Alright shipwrights, welcome to another Lindan Engineering build. I've got another gunship build for you all today. This ship features an over-under double fuselage design with the cockpit situated right between the two prongs. I'm actually really happy with the way this ship turned out, and this is probably my bias speaking, but I really think this ship looks good from just about every single angle. It takes some inspiration from the Nacelles-class starfighter, better known as the Geonosian starfighter from Star Wars, but the main inspiration for this build comes from avbrytarn and his Infraris 9 Vermilion blade. It's easily one of the coolest designs out there, and avbrytarn has been making some of the most unique ships that I've seen on the Starfield ships subreddit. While his ships are more on the advanced side of shipbuilding, I highly recommend checking out his builds if you ever need inspiration, and I've linked his profile in the description. Now this build does require 2 paid mods if you want it to look exactly like this. These mods are Badtech and Aventech Race Yards. For Badtech, the mod author WK Baldwin has many mods, and I recommend getting any of his newer ones if you also want some really cool ship builds with the included parts. This build also features a newer ship mod called Crimson Fleet Rearmed by Flight Controller. It's a free mod that features a lot of custom parts like new halves, new cockpits, new weapons, and it's definitely a quality mod. Flight Controller, you did a great job. For those of you who don't use any paid mods, I'll also show a free alternative build method whenever it applies. You'll be using completely different parts, but the overall aesthetic is pretty much the same. And I'll tie this all up at the end of the build guide portion of the video. Now I intended for this ship to have a military focused background, but it's also a great bounty hunting ship. I know many of you like to roleplay as bounty hunters, and in my opinion, this ship definitely looks the part. So I've included an Altec brig in here for that specific roleplay, and you'll see this in the interior tour at the end. Last but not least, this is a very straightforward build. If you're comfortable with shipbuilding, you should be able to get this done pretty quickly. But always remember, if you have any questions or you get stuck anywhere, feel free to reach out to me in the comments. Alright, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. Now I know I've mentioned this before, but man, work and life have both been pretty busy for me lately, so I appreciate your patience between uploads. I haven't even been able to play the game as consistently as before, which means I still haven't had time to dive into the CK yet. So a proper ship mod for creations is still a ways off, and I'm really sorry about that. But when my schedule clears up, I will prioritize adding some of my builds to the Transfer Ships Across Universes mod over on Nexus. Also, my interior decorations guide will hopefully be done early June, and I'll be covering recommended mods and decorating tips and tricks for your ships. Hopefully I'll be able to knock these out sooner than later, but again, I just want to say thank you for being patient and continuing to support and share your feedback with me. Every comment, every suggestion, even every build request, it really means a lot, and I just want to thank you all for that support. As always, feel free to reach out to me in the comments if you have any questions or build requests, or if you just want to chat all things Starfield and shipbuilding. This is Lindan, signing off. See you in the Starfield.